Well, a very good afternoon to everyone joining us for our final webinar here as part of Townsville Enterprise's Unlock the North series. My name's Wade Chiesa, the Director of Regional Development and Investment at Townsville Enterprise, and it is wonderful for you to be able to join us this afternoon. Today's focus is on health and knowledge, but what about health and knowledge? Townsville is home to some world-leading health, research and education facilities, but how can we utilise these institutions to create new industry and jobs? How do we ensure that our youth studying STEM subjects in the region have employment opportunities in the region, and how do we prevent them from moving away? How do we ensure our world-leading research is commercialised and manufactured right here in North Queensland, especially in the post-COVID world where supply chains are becoming increasingly under scrutiny? Today, you're going to hear the answers to these questions and how, with the right investment in enabling infrastructure, we'll be able to unlock these opportunities for North Queensland. Before we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners in which the land we meet and pay my respects to those elders past, present and emerging. Before we get underway with the official welcome, I'd like to say a big hello to our panel, Alan Carpenter, the Commercial and Community Development Strategist at JCU. Hi, Alan. Great to have you with us. To David Mitchell, the Director of Planning and Business Development at Townsville University Hospital. And right beside him is Kieran Keys, the Health Service Chief Executive Officer at Townsville University Hospital. G'day, Kieran. And Patricia Brand, the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Services and Resources Division at JCU, with the TropIQ logo right beside you. Hello, Trish. And also to Patricia O'Callaghan, the CEO of Townsville Enterprise. And I'll hand over to you, Trish, to officially welcome us here this afternoon.
Thanks for that, Wade. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet and their elders past and present, to all of our distinguished guests and politicians that are tuning in this afternoon, to our speakers, that we have a great lineup on today, and we do have a fantastic session upcoming. So as Wade noted, today the theme that we are focusing on is health and knowledge, and there is no more a timely window to discuss this topic. We're really proud up here in Townsville and North Queensland. We are very proud to say that we are home of James Cook University, the Townsville University Hospital, and a range of other health, education, research and innovation enterprises. With the launch of TropIQ in December 2019 by the then Health Minister and now Deputy Premier Stephen Miles, who is in town today making some great announcements. We also saw him alongside the Mayor Jenny Hill, and really a vision to set this region up to become a sought after destination for the top researchers and clinicians alike. We know North Queensland is on the precipice of establishing itself as a global leader in tropical health and knowledge. We are a community that is dedicated to helping the world access, understand and benefit from breakthroughs and solutions in health and tropical science. We are supported by a world-class digital connectivity, and with further investment in this, we know that the region has the ability to provide an excellence never seen before in healthcare to remote and equatorial neighbours. We're building on an established health and knowledge precinct, and this living laboratory at the moment has a collaborative ecosystem of over 70 organisations that are strongly linked to our city, our CBD, and which is anchored by our university in JCU. It is a collaborative ecosystem that our entire regional community will be advancing through, and we know that this will contribute to a happier and healthier, not only North Queensland, but Queensland and Australia alike. So today we're going to go deeper. We're going to look at going in and discussing how we can further enhance our world-class tropical intelligence precinct, how it will open up a pipeline of investment for commercial and private enterprise, which is so important considering through this COVID pandemic, we have been saying that this recovery will be private sector led. And we will also be looking at the collaboration between our local health, knowledge and defence sectors that will really position this region as world leaders, because it is about securing a stronger future for us, but also creating jobs now and into the future. So we are going to start this session off with a video. It was developed as part of TropIQ's marketing collateral, and it is about introducing this wonderful project to our international and national stages. So thanks for that, Wade, and we'll hand over to the video.
TropIQ is a unique partnership that will establish a tropical intelligence and health and knowledge precinct in Townsville. Backed by the Townsville City Council and endorsed by the Queensland Government, TropIQ is a key deliverable of the federal government's Townsville City deal. Leveraging Townsville's location in one of the most biodiverse regions on the planet, TropIQ will have a unique position as a world-class hub in marine science and tropical disease. This precinct aims to open a pipeline of investment for private and commercial enterprise into Townsville, with a focus on innovation in science, technology and research. TropIQ will make Townsville a destination of choice for researchers, scientists and clinicians who will leverage our living laboratory as they strive to overcome the challenges of the tropical world. Welcome to TropIQ.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Trish, and for the video that was played at the launch of TropIQ in December last year. The format of today, we're about to see a presentation on TropIQ. As always, the Zoom Q&A function is available. Please post your questions, and our panel will be answering questions straight after the presentation. All right, it's time to hear all things TropIQ. I'd like to hand over to Alan Carpenter to get us underway. G'day, Alan.
G'day, Wade. I'm just going to take possession of your screens. It's nice to have the power. This presentation, by the way, has 4 parts. I'm leading off and the others will follow. Okay, you should have the presentation now. I'm going to kick off with a little primer on health and knowledge precincts, because we're inclined to talk amongst ourselves in code around this, and it's helpful for those of you who are less across it to see what's behind it. Health and knowledge precincts are a thing of the age, and they're all about the economics of agglomeration, in that the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. So take a hospital and a university and other related entities, and you've got a knowledge ecosystem. But the health and knowledge precincts seek to, I suppose, break down the barriers through place-based urban development, and thereby deliver this ecosystem which can give us a competitive advantage going forward. Cities also do this to diversify their cities, to provide a conduit for new kinds of economies going forward. And for us, selfishly, the university and the hospital, it allows us to attract the best and brightest who, in effect, ensure our future. Commonly, health and knowledge precincts obviously have universities and hospitals. They always have government leadership. There's always private investment of some kind, and industry partnerships and not-for-profits are also an important part of them. In addition, they often also have private health. Private hospitals are not unusual. Innovation incubators, medi-hotels, residential precincts, and train stations. I mention that because it's inescapable. You look at these things around the country, around the world, and always there's a public transport hub sitting at the heart of it. To make them work, you need fit-for-purpose governance, and we're developing that with our city partners right now. You need a land resource, and we're well served there. You need infrastructure, we're less well served there, and you need to be famous. Now, these things are happening everywhere. Everywhere is a bit of an exaggeration, but certainly in every city seems to have one of these things. Here's a pastiche of health and knowledge precincts around the country and internationally. And we visited most of these and learned a lot from them. Probably the 2 that we see as our lighthouses, if you like, to sort of strive to emulate would be the Murdoch Health and Knowledge Precinct in Perth and the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct in the Gold Coast. But there are many more, and it's the thing of the age. Not so long ago, perhaps in the 70s and 80s, they always talked about tech parks as the way forward. They're relatively sterile. You see, these things are typically much more place-based. Despite the virtual world, place still matters, and the quality of the urban environment also matters. The TropIQ is a child of an MOU between JSU and THHS signed in 2017, and also and became a thing under the city deal, under what was called the Health and Knowledge Strategy as a pillar of the city deal. And happily, the Department of State Development has picked up on this, and they've actually, it says about to be released, actually have just released their document describing what that's all about. Formally, the partnership is the city, the university, and the hospital. And as Tricia mentioned, it was launched by Minister Miles in 2019, in December. And we noted at that point that a 5.9 billion capital investment was anticipated by the plans going forward. Our purpose, now, Health and Knowledge Precincts really should have a compelling reason to exist. Many don't, they just rely on being very good at different things. We have a compelling purpose, and that's to protect and empower life through the application of tropical intelligence. And this is deep in the DNA of our organisations, the tropical thing. And it's kind of nice as well because it cuts across many disciplines and allows us to be really broad in our approach going forward. If we were, for example, just specialising in automotives or something, it's obviously much narrower. And the tropics, you don't have to absorb everything in this slide, but they are important. Researchers often talk about wicked problems going forward, and the big wicked problems on the planet are all in the tropics. The two things to note from this slide, if you look at the top is describing a massive, massive infrastructure deficit in the tropics. There's a lot less there that is actually needed. And the bit on the orange on the side makes it even worse because they see that number 67%. Actually, by 2050, we're forecasting 67% of the world's children under 15 will be in the tropics. And that's a recipe for something needing a precinct such as TropIQ. More locally, we are pitching this precinct as one of the productive precincts of Townsville. We don't want it to be isolated. And you'll hear us banging on forever about the thing called Smartlink, which connects back to the CBD. It just so happens to be just a lovely piece of urban infrastructure that gives a spine to the city, reinforces the spine to the city, gives us a backbone, in fact. And wouldn't it be fantastic if there's a way for people to flip in and out very efficiently? And it would certainly mark out Townsville as a place to aspire to. My last slide, I want to emphasise that this is a long time coming, 50 years in fact. There's been this steady accretion of things coming towards Douglas, all in that health and knowledge space. The one I'd just like to draw your attention to is 2009. The state of Queensland then had an initiative around science precincts, and they, looking across the state, figured out that there were actually 3 places in the state where you can do a really cracking good precinct of this kind. And the 3 of them were the University of Queensland, Princess Alexandra and Boggo Road, 1. 2 was Griffith University and the Gold Coast Hospital, 2. And the 3rd one was us. And the remarkable thing is that those other 2 precincts have received massive, massive investment from government, state and federal since that time. And we've kind of languished on the edges. And I think if we had one message from it today, it's our turn. So that's essential, the territory we're working in. We're going to hand over to David Mitchell now, who's going to talk to the physicality of it. Well, what does it mean in terms of stuff actually happening here? So David, it's all yours.
Thank you, Alan. So effectively, sitting behind what Alan said in terms of the vision and the history that has walked us towards this point of having TropIQ as a formalised and recognised brand of Townsville's Health and Knowledge Precinct, it's underpinned by many, many years of planning. Some of that dates back decades in terms of the university. Some of that has led to the placement of the hospital out on the Douglas site. But most recently, and I think most importantly, in terms of the connection to TropIQ, James Cook University completed a master plan for their part of the site in 2017. And following that, the University Hospital and Townsville Hospital and Health Service overall undertook their master planning exercise to understand what the demands were going to look like from a health perspective and what was the associated infrastructure that we would require, both here at the Douglas site and across the city and our other regional sites, to service that need for our growing population. One of the important parts of that process, which was opened up by the James Cook University Master Plan, was the northern side or the northern zone of the James Cook University Hospital, which is the border to the southern side of the university, is the border to the southern side of the hospital. James Cook left that space as somewhat undefined, hoping that the University Hospital would be able to pick up through their master planning process and work with them collaboratively to understand how we might be able to integrate those two sites. So one of the great successes of the University Hospital master planning process that did finish in 2019 was to start to understand what we could do with that space in terms of creating a health and knowledge core zone. And that zone is what we envisaged to be the central point between the two that would start to bring in private and commercialisation opportunities and entrepreneurialism around tropical intelligence. We'll go to the next slide on that one, Alan. So from then, we've continued that collaborative planning exercise, and we're working with architectural experts that have helped us collectively along the way. And the slide that you're looking at the moment starts to break down that centralised core zone into developable land opportunities. These land opportunities or these development sites will also have a direct line of sight to micro precincts within the broader health and knowledge precinct zone. So within this slide here that Alan's just flipped to, we do have over 400 hectare combined land holding here. And the anchor tenants, the university down the bottom middle of that diagram you're looking at the moment, does have a central university zone that they will continue to develop for core university purposes. And the bluer section up to the top is the clinical zone where the university hospital, which Kieran will go through in a moment, will have a phased development approach specifically around the demands on health services. But what you'll see wrapped around that, and particularly in the core zone that Alan's circling now, are opportunities for additional investment into the site that won't necessarily be driven by the anchor tenants, but by having a nexus and a relationship and a co-location with us, will start to provide other opportunities for other industries. One of those exciting ones is out on the right-hand side of this diagram, where we start to envisage opportunities to co-locate mixed-use development with defence that has a direct relationship with clinical and university business. And then you have other sections within this that occupy concepts around marine science, aquaculture, sports and recreation, schooling and aged care, and the other supportive elements to modern health and knowledge precincts, which include residential opportunities within the site. So effectively, with Townsville City Council as a partner in this process, we've worked probably for over about around 12 to 18 months on a planning framework, on a governance structure, on a partnership arrangement, and on a precinct planning perspective to understand what it is that we need to come together on and get broader support across the city to drive this vision into the future. I'll hand across to Kieran now to talk more specifically around the health proposition around that.
From my perspective, this is a unique partnership, certainly in the state of Queensland, and one of very few, I'm sure, in the country, in terms of the integration of planning that's occurring between a public service health organisation and an adjacent university. Indeed, I don't think there's anywhere in the country that combines the location specifics of, you know, a Defence Force base, a university, and a tertiary hospital. Our area of operations is focused on North Queensland. If you were to draw a line, though, across the country from just north or from Noosa to just north of Perth, we are the largest hospital on the northern side of that line. We service a catchment population that's projected to grow by 7% up to 326,000 people by 2041, and our immediate catchment area is not without its own geography issues as well. It's got an area the size of the South Island of New Zealand, so that presents unique challenges in and of itself. In terms of the drivers for our growth, though, we're a large organisation in our own right here at the Townsville University Hospital. On any given day, we'll see more than 300 people through our emergency departments. These are some numbers from 2018-19. I can tell you that we're on track to deliver well north of 9,000 elective surgery procedures this financial year. Births are close to 3,000 in terms of forecast demand. At the moment, actually, our neonatal intensive care unit, which is the largest neonatal intensive care unit in Northern Australia, is absolutely full, and that's a reflection of our increasing ability to care for mothers preterm with unwell infants and deliver those safely, and they require ongoing care or extended care in a neonatal environment. Of course, on any given day, we're now doing more than 200 COVID swabs across the health service as well. This translates into a significant economic footprint across the patch as well. We employ more than 6,500 people directly now. Our budget alone in our own right is over $1 billion, and we support more than $1 billion worth of wages in terms of economic output across the region. We're also the largest teaching hospital in Northern Australia, and that's a significant part of our role. Our own purpose is to be the leader in regional Australia for healthcare, education and research. And we take seriously our responsibilities across those three patches. So from an economic driver perspective, we know that the ageing population and the disproportionate rate that's growing for us, combined with the underlying population growth, we have to accommodate something like 400 beds over the next 20 years. That's no mean feat. This is an image of our current precinct at the moment, and you'll see the reference there to JCU. We need to be able to accommodate that growth of 400 beds across 3 unique stages. This is a rendition of what that would look like coming to fruition. One of the things that is really apparent when you look at our present configuration is the fact that we're mostly at grade. Our peak stories, we're 4 stories high at our peak when we take into account the basement. We haven't really utilised the vertical elevation at all. And of course, every spare patch of dirt, we've put a car park on. That really tells us something about how we need to expand. And I've talked in some of the public forums before that we are 2.7 on the Bunnings Index, which means that the perimeter of our existing hospital is 2.7 times your average Bunnings. So what that means is we really can't go up, given the way the buildings have been built, and we can't go outwards in terms of physically extending on our existing buildings. We need to build new, and to build new, we need to repossess a couple of car parks. So when we talk about the stages of how this development is going to take place, the first stage is the largest in terms of the vertical expansion that's referenced. And that's principally centred on our 142-bed, 10-storey facility, which goes on the current helipad site. To those who are familiar with our geography, you'd be aware that that's actually going to require a significant reconfiguration of the road entrance to the site and also a multi-storey car park. And some of you might have heard that before going into caretaker, there was funding committed to a stage one preliminary business case of $1.5 million to take this one step closer to reality, which is really exciting news from our perspective. In terms of stage 2, that will bring about for us the expansion of our mental health facilities. That's just a rendition of what stage 1 looks like there. In terms of phase 2, though, it brings about a renewal of our mental health facilities, additional car parking capability, and importantly, because we've been able to achieve some expansion capability in that first phase, it allows us to internally reconfigure our existing clinical core, which allows us to provide for expanded critical care capacity. We have a incredibly tight critical care capacity at the moment. We've got room for about 5 more hard bed expansions within our existing footprint before we need to grow that physically. So it's really important that this phase 2 does come online, because again, we're the tertiary referral site for all of North Queensland, and we receive sick children and adults from as far afield as New Guinea and the western border of Queensland and south to places like Winton. And finally, the third phase of our master plan is the largest. This rendition I'll just talk to quickly though. One of the pleasing things about this rendition for me about mental health is how it accommodates a proximity to our emergency department. You know, people who come to us with being acutely unwell with a mental illness are presently very difficult for us to transfer across to the acute mental health service, and it's a high-risk transfer that doesn't really respect the dignity of those consumers. And we've got here a linkway tunnel that connects the main hospital across to the mental health facility, and of course provides for a new secure unit and the relocation of the adolescent service as well. But phase 3 is certainly the largest of our single phases in our master plan, and it will effectively see the replacement of our existing ward infrastructure and expansion of those into 3 separate ward blocks, and that will be staged such that we don't need to demolish the existing ward block until the very end of this phase, which is right hard up against the 20-year horizon of our current planning envelope. And you'll have seen along the way, every single phase brings with it some multi-storey car parking, because again, so much of our land is locked into on-ground car parking, which is really quite wasteful in that sense. And also phase 3 activates that core between ourselves and JCU for education and research capability as well. One of the things that I glossed over in my intro was just the strength of our research capability. And a quick example of that has been our MRI linear accelerator. It's the first of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere to be put into operational use. And already our clinicians and researchers are presenting at international conferences on some of their early findings and advances in clinical care that they've been able to deliver from that, which puts Townsville on the world stage, not only when it comes to healthcare, but I think as a exciting place to live, work and play. So on that note, I'll hand over to you, Trish, to take us forward.
Thanks, Kieran. I'm just going to kick off with just sharing some stats around the university. So drawing on our world rankings and latest economic impact study. So a couple of things there just to note that JCU is in the top 400 universities in the world. We've been getting 5 stars for full-time employment for over 10 years now. One interesting fact there, #1 in the world for marine biology. I think that's a well-known fact, but what's interesting is that Townsville can boast that, like no other city in Australia can, that it has #1 in the world in marine biology. There is no other city in Australia that can do that. So I think that's, you know, hats off to Townsville, and we should promote that a little bit more, I would suggest. The other thing I just wanted to draw out is around the $1.75 billion in JCU's contribution to human capital. So in this economic impact study that we did on 2018 graduates, we graduated about 2,500 students that year. And so the economic or the human capital of those students over the lifetime of their careers contribution into the economy is $1.75 billion. So that's nothing to be underestimated about there. And I guess just to sort of highlight about the role that universities play and how crucial they are in human capital. And the presence of graduates in the region demonstrably contributes higher wages and lower unemployment rates and provides an educated workforce. So this contribution to human capital is an important catalyst for growth, economic activity and wellbeing in the regional areas. So the ongoing graduation of students from JCU creates a pipeline of human capital to support the region's economic development and sustainability. So moving on then to some of the numbers contained in that economic impact report. So you can see there the economic impact of 622 million, 4,200 full-time jobs, an increase of 32% of employment since 2012, and 56% increase in economic impact since 2012. So it's worth noting that we've got over 13,000 students here in Townsville with 1,500 international students. Our aim is to develop the workforce of the region. And JCU aspires to develop graduates who have the knowledge, skills and disposition to succeed in a global workforce. And I'm pleased to say, Kieran and David, I don't know whether you know these stats, but we've been graduating doctors since 2005. I think we all know that, more than 1,500 graduates. A third of those graduates in medicine are serving communities in regional, rural, remote Australia, with half of them right here in the tropical north. So I think that's pretty impressive. That's one of our mandates, is to educate in the north, and they'll stay in the north. So moving on then, what have we got planned for TropIQ? So we've got 2 immediate projects that are underway: the student accommodation and the technology innovation complex, with the number in the short to medium and medium to long term range. So that middle section there, the short to medium term, all of those projects are under feasibility planning at the moment. Kieran mentioned about the hospital, but the Tropical Brain and Mind Institute was an inquiry that we received out of Brisbane, wanting to relocate and co-locate that institute here, because the hospital's here, because of what we do in the medical and allied health area. David talked about the integrated simulation hub as well, so that one is currently underway too. The other developments there are more in the medium to long term, but these are potentially new enterprises that we're looking to attract into TropIQ, and certainly discussions going on with a number of those at the moment. So that's just a render there of the student accommodation facility. So we had a smoking ceremony on site this morning and turning the sod. So it's really great to see that underway. That's being constructed, $54 million facility to house 400 odd students on Mount Stewart Street. And co-located with that is the Technology Innovation Complex. That's a $96 million facility. That's to replace our engineering and IT facilities. Construction on that is due to start in the next couple of months. So just on Mount Stewart Street, there's going to be a hive of activity over the next couple of years, but it's $150 million worth of capital works. And both of these projects were NAIF funded, and the student accommodation will create 150 construction jobs, and 85% of all the subcontractors and suppliers will be locally sourced. So we're really pleased to report on that. David mentioned previously about the simulation and human performance precinct. So that render there has it on the boundary of the hospital, JCU and Laverack Barracks, and it's I think it's been given the name of Spark. And as I said, that's going through feasibility studies as we speak. So you can see the location of that in relation to the hospital and the central core of the university. So I guess, why Townsville and why now? I think Alan outlined at the start that, well, it's our turn. That's why. That's one of the major reasons why. We need investment like this in the north, and we think that we've got building on the capability and capacity that already exists here. Kieran's outlined, what the hospital has done and is planning on doing, and certainly with JCU as well. So building on that productive capacity, human capital and the land resource, I think we've got the makings of something really special. So, nowhere else in Australia do we have the largest tertiary teaching hospital, world-class research university in JCU, and the biggest military base. So all co-located. So we know that now through the work with Spark, that none of that, those three major entities co-located exists anywhere. So if we can't capitalise on that and make something special out of that, well, geez, I'll be hugely surprised. So in terms of competitive advantage, it's just go back one. Yeah, it's really important to understand here that we're up against these sorts of enterprises and developments going into the southeast Queensland, other parts of Australia, and indeed other countries. We've got a conversation going on at the moment with Defence about an exciting initiative that JC is doing some research on. And so Defence were sort of saying, oh, well, we'll look at putting the enterprise associated with that in the southeast corner. And we said, well, actually, no, it'd be much better located in TropIQ, locate that facility where the research is being undertaken. So that just gives an example of the sort of things that we're up against, and you know, why we think the time is right. And you know, the investment in the new knowledge industry, commercialisation of research. We've got such a lot here that we've built up over the last, you know, 50 years in the case of JCU and more recently for the hospital. However, we need, keep going, Ellen, we need, there are some impediments to actually realising the full potential of TropIQ. David sort of talked about the historic development, and so both of our campuses within the precinct look like that, the hospital campus and the JCU campus, and we're very much wanting to link those up in the way that David presented through those master planning slides. So in order to do that though, we do require infrastructure upgrades, and you know, it's in all those things necessary, but perhaps not as exciting as building beautiful new buildings, but you know, roads, sewerage, water, electricity, telecommunications, these are all really important and essential things to make TropIQ development ready. Without it being development ready, the likes of the Spark and the Brain Institute, they are looking to come and set up shop in TropIQ, but they're wanting to plug into trunk infrastructure. These projects won't be able to sustain having to build trunk infrastructure from sites like the Spark on the boundary through to, you know, the front of the campus. It'll sink the project. So we need to get this infrastructure embedded so that we make the site development ready and make it easy for new investment into TropIQ and into Townsville. So what we're asking through the state government is support for initial studies, planning studies, professional, scientific and technical services to plan out what that looks like, the roads and infrastructure necessary to do that. We've had some engineering works done to estimate that. We think it's around, you know, 300 million over the next 5 years, creating, you know, 630 jobs in the process. But that's what it might look like with major public transport routes coming in, and public, that infrastructure would then become public infrastructure as well. It wouldn't be owned by the hospital or JCU. So that's sort of what we're looking for to make TropIQ development ready, but really to really realise the potential and the huge capability and capacity that already exists here with all the good work that's been done over many years.
Thanks very much, Tricia, and thanks very much to our panel for that presentation. We do have questions that are available. Obviously, please post your questions via the Q&A app on Zoom. But I will start a question for our panel to start with. Is that where it's at, tropical intelligence? Is that our competitive advantage here in the region? I know during the presentation we've seen a number of other health and knowledge precincts, but is that what sets us apart? That and the fact that we have, as you said, defence, the hospital and university all co-located in one area.
Absolutely. From a health service perspective, absolutely. You know, our populations, and particularly our First Nations populations, are unfortunately home to some unique pathology and diseases that actually just aren't seen in many other parts of the country, and actually seen rarely in many parts of the world. And the opportunity to apply research in a living environment to patients who can directly benefit from that is a unique value proposition to our healthcare providers and researchers. And, you know, to the extent that promotes our joint aims between the university and ourselves, that promotes further enrolments in the university, which makes us a more attractive recruitment proposition as well. It's 100% for mine our competitive advantage, Wade. But Trish might have a few words to say as well.
Thanks, Kieran. It certainly is. JCU was established all those years ago to be Australia's University for the Tropics, so it makes absolute sense. So just to demonstrate that point, so we've got research going on currently in collaboration with the hospital around malaria vaccine. You know, that's a tropical disease. The research for that should be undertaken in the tropics. You know, that's where we experience it. And that was one of the, you know, the discussions that we're in discussion with Defence on around where facilities, production facilities might be located. So absolutely, it's about the tropics.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because, and some people might say, oh, well, you need roads and all this infrastructure, but it's really about making sure that the research can happen in the same precinct, that you can then send it to commercialisation, and even better if you can have a facility almost next door that you can manufacture. I think I want to get that point across. Is that really critical to have all those opportunities under one banner and one area?
Yeah, I might interject there. Place matters absolutely. The analytics, the molecular science, things like that, the aquaria, these are physical things that you need to physically test, and they overlap. You can't just have an aquarium. You need the molecular stuff that comes with it. You know, it's the productive capital that already exists. The thing that's missing, it's got there a bit, but we absolutely need much more private investment in it. And that's kind of why we keep harping on about enabling infrastructure to make it development ready for that to happen.
And that's how, I guess, you encourage industry to become involved when it is development ready. I guess on the flip side, if it's not done, is there a risk that this research that's done is taken elsewhere and commercialised and manufactured elsewhere?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what we're defending the turf here in Townsville and in TropIQ, because we've got the expertise, the capability, the assets and the investment that's been made into the hospital and JCU over many, many years. We need to capitalise on that. And so for a small investment, I think, to make the site development ready, it means we can retain, we can attract new investment and new jobs, new people into the region. And why shouldn't it come to Townsville? Why shouldn't it? It doesn't need to go to the southeast corner or elsewhere.
And just on or elsewhere, for decades, ANU was the go-to place for tropical agriculture right throughout Melanesia. It's where it was done, for God's sake, in ANU, in the deep south. Why not here? It's just a natural.
I think that's the fair point. Is it fair to say that this is about creating new industry? And we heard that in the Defence webinar last week, in that Spark precinct that's looking at being located there. This is new industry that creates new jobs and opportunity for those, I guess, the youth to come forward and you know, be able to study STEM and work in the region.
Absolutely. One of the things, Wade, we launched TropIQ last year, and no sooner did we finish the launch than the phone started ringing from proponents of industries, you know, such as medi-hotels, research laboratories, who wanted actually to understand, well, what is this TropIQ thing? How do I bring my particular industry or business to TropIQ? And that's what's unique about this partnership for mine from a health service perspective, is that it's an absolute multiplier effect. This isn't about just more pure health jobs or just more university jobs in the sense that we know them. This will be new jobs that don't exist in Townsville now, brought to our region. That actually, it's a competitive landscape out there, and you know that the southern-based universities are partnering with big pharma and other people who would happily take their industry and economy somewhere else. And I think that's what's the game changer about this partnership.
And Wade, I want to answer that. One of the big learnings that we got when we were undertaking the detailed planning around TropIQ was to understand the role of these new industries and the potential effects on existing traditional industries within the landscape. So one of the big learnings from that, and we've seen it on the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge precinct, the concerns around central business districts and other areas within the broader city around what competitive environment does that place upon them. And the strong message out of this for those who may have that concern is that this is not an exercise of redistributing existing economy. This is introducing new economy that otherwise would not exist in Townsville and would not exist within the region if it were not for the TropIQ opportunity, that co-location, that integration with the university, hospital, and James Cook University.
Yeah, very, very good point. And it seems there's lots of opportunities by those three major industry and employers that have been situated in Douglas for many, many years in terms of defence, hospital and university, and lots of new industry can come from that. Talking about industry, how does industry become involved? If they're watching now and say, well, I want to find out more, how do they become involved in TropIQ?
All right, I'll go. First thing is to talk to us. David, Mitchell and myself have kind of been the gateways, but it sort of depending on what you're after, we can connect up to pretty much anything. It is our intention to issue an information memorandum into the future, which would be more of a formal gateway, but we really do value the informal conversations because it allows us to have an understanding of what's out there. This is critical information for us.
Thanks very much, Alan. What's the role in government in health and knowledge precincts? Like, what is their role in this?
Look, I'm going to carry on with this. Over probably a decade, we've been looking at other precincts and as they developed and how they developed and what are the critical elements. And the issue you come up against is that you've actually got a partnership of equals, the university, the hospital, and frequently there are other entities as well. But you actually do need that coordinating piece of coordinating tissue, coordinating layer, and inevitably it's government that does that. And that's planning and coordination in respect of planning, coordination in respect of governance, coordination in respect of resourcing. And the truth of these precincts is that they are much bigger than the players. So you do need that other layer to guide it through.
And I was just going to chime in there to say that, you know, the hospital's done fantastic things and is, you know, a major, as we heard, major tertiary hospital in Northern Australia, as is JCU, world-class university. But, you know, this thing, TropIQ, it's bigger than both of us. And we need government support now to take it to the next level.
Thanks, Trish. We've got a question that's come in from an attendee. Alan, I'll throw it over to you. Where is the commercial linkages, and do you see this in the Douglas precinct or more diverse around North Queensland?
Yeah, it's either or both. It just depends on what it is. Clearly, we've run the pitch that place matters, and we kind of like stuff to happen in the precinct, but it doesn't have to. Some things that obviously would happen in the precinct, for example, the aquaculture play that's currently on stream, you know, it's really is helpful for aquaculture sort of private industry to have their R&D happening on campus because you've got access to all the good stuff that comes with it. But equally, they move to the next phase. They're actually in the process of developing something. So they're out there in the Burdekin or wherever doing it on site. So it can be either or.
Thanks very much. Competitors in this space, in terms of nationally, globally, I guess it's a global market, a global competition in this space at the moment, isn't it?
Very much, and even from a healthcare perspective, you know, we've got clinicians and researchers who are looking at facilities where they can experience a wide range of clinical practice, but also apply their research. And so it's extremely competitive from a healthcare recruitment point of view. And that's why, you know, the partnership's such a game changer in terms of being able to offer people the ability to apply clinical practice and translational research all in the one stop and work in a great part of the world to boot.
And I guess just building on that, our students that we graduate, we need to keep them here in the north. So we need to open up access to, you know, new jobs, new industry and new exciting things to do here. They don't have to go away south or overseas to do that.
Yeah, great point. Does COVID present an additional opportunity in relation to maybe, you know, some of these researchers wanting to move up to like a place like Townsville and you know, commercialise and manufacture in the region? And I guess you must be buoyed by commentary about more onshoring of manufacturing.
I think the effects and the response to COVID continues to be an evolutionary sort of space wide. Certainly, you know, we are the tree change opportunity, I'm sure, for many other parts of the country, if not the world, in terms of a place to live that's in a relatively lower risk environment at the moment, which is just terrific. From a manufacturer perspective, we've seen a pivot, if you like, from some of the manufacturing industry to adapt to production of things like sterile gowns and of course hand sanitizer, which has been important, and that's happening more locally in Queensland. There's still some specialised work that probably won't be brought on shore, I think, anytime soon. But if what we have to do is be able to convince those people who are interested in that tree change or sea change that they can come live, work and play here and still be at the cutting edge of their own clinical field of practice as well. And we're pleased, for example, to be bringing one of the country's leading renal physicians here as a director of research from November, who's also heads up Queensland Renal Genomics Program. So just another example, and who happens to be a JCU graduate and a local product, which is a really great story.
Yeah.
What the partnership can do.
That's fantastic. I'm conscious of time, and what I might do is go around to our panel for some closing comments. Kieran, I know you've got a 2 o'clock, so I'll start with you, Kieran and David.
So I'll just finish off, Wade, by saying, again, I've worked in some of the state's biggest tertiary facilities, and nowhere in the state, and I don't think the country actually, does this level of partnership exist when it comes to integration of planning. And this is going to leverage both of our strategic potentials for the region.
Thanks, Kieran.
I'll just probably add to that, Wade, to say, again, in terms of the value proposition built around tropical expertise, we are the logical place, not only within the country to do this, and we do have our living laboratory, wet tropics, dry tropics, barrier reef, that co-location that Kieran's talking about in terms of Defence, University Hospital, and James Cook University, the opportunities there to leverage off the ethical position from a global perspective around nurturing tropical populations globally. That's certainly something that will also appeal to new generational mindsets that you see in global movements. These younger workforces are looking for places to work that have an ethical standpoint on a global scale, places that mean something and that are trying to achieve a vision that's helpful for the planet. And I believe that TropIQ very much serves that purpose.
Great point, David. Alan?
Yeah, I'll just close by saying I'm a Townsville patriot, and I think I would really love to see our city move beyond, if you like, extractive industries, and whilst they'll always be important and they'll also always vary, we need to have that much more sophisticated element to our economy.
Thanks, Alan. Tricia?
Yeah, I guess just to add to what everyone else has said, that and to reiterate, this isn't about JCU and the hospital. This is about Townsville and the region, and what we can actually put Townsville and the region on the global stage. I really do think that's absolutely possible, and we all need to get behind it and give this thing a red hot go.
Well, on that note, I want to thank our panel for their time. Kieran Keys and David Mitchell, Alan Carpenter and Patricia Brand. Thank you very much for your presentation and answering our questions on TropIQ. I think it is really exciting to see these institutions working collaboratively and so closely, and to see how far TropIQ's come in such a short period of time, and also the interest in TropIQ as well, to ensure that our research turns into commercialisation, turns into manufacturing, and turns into jobs for our community and our region and our youth. And it ties beautifully to our kids being able to study in those degrees and those courses and live and work in the region. So I think it's really exciting times. We will continue to advocate for that enabling infrastructure to be funded by the levels of government that are required. And hopefully next time you join us, we're seeing TropIQ advance even further. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And thank you for joining us in the final Unlock the North webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it. Of course, all these recordings will be on our website, townsvilleenterprise.com.au. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good afternoon.